real transportation challenge isn't EVs, it's humans.
I think the challenges aren't engineering, to be honest. I think the challenges are political. If the engineers were able to do it and had all the money in the world.
I'm a tunneling guy myself, so anything I can put underground here is definitely the best choice. Don't get engineers started about engineering.
Hi there, my name is Dusty Rhodes and you're welcome to Amplified, the Engineers Journal podcast and the second episode in our special mini-series on sustainability. As engineers and a nation, we are racing against a 2030 deadline to transform transport systems across multiple engineering disciplines. The goal? Seamless, multimodal transport networks powered by clean energy to create a positive environmental impact. But how do we do this, and how do you make sustainability a fundamental design principle? Joining us to share their experience and some insights on this are Brian Caulfield, Professor in Transportation at Trinity College Dublin and a leading expert in transportation research, particularly on its environmental impact. We also have Robert Sizer, Director of Engineering for UK at IESA, who excels at overseeing large, complex design projects, including those for major rail infrastructure like stations and tunnels. Rob and Brian, you're both very welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, big thanks, Dusty.
Let me set the scene first. In the first episode, we covered SDGs and the current state of sustainability in Ireland. Today, we're focusing on the transport sector, one which encompasses so many other disciplines, including civil, technology, chemical, and all that. Brian, from an engineering perspective, can I start by asking you, what do you think are the most challenging aspects of meeting transport emission targets by the dreaded 2030?
I think the challenges aren't engineering, to be honest. I think the challenges are political. I think that from an engineering perspective, and Rob will be able to talk a lot about this, the delivery of big transport infrastructure is something that's been happening all across the world for decades. And we in Ireland, and maybe more specifically in Dublin, haven't been delivering that type of infrastructure for decades. So I think it's political. The political will to deliver them, I think, is going to be the big issue. I think, and then also I think socially, it's a big problem too. So to reach those targets of a 50% reduction in emissions by the end of the decade, it requires everybody to change how they move and change fundamentally how we operate as an economy. And I think then, it kind of leads to, is that target actually feasible, or is it even realistic? So there are lots of challenges. I don't see that there are very many engineering ones. If the engineers were able to do it and had all the money in the world, we'd be building metros and light rails right now.
There you go. We'd have it done by 2028. That's what you're telling us, all right? You mentioned social acceptance and stuff like that. I feel that a big driver of, I think this particular area is public transport, because they're highly visible. People get to experience the changes. They accept these new ideas a lot quicker. What do you think is a key engineering hurdle in transitioning existing bus fleets, for example, to more sustainable fuels like, and there's hydrogen, electric, biofuels, that kind of stuff?
Again, I think a lot of the solutions are already there. So in terms of electric buses, I think we've passed 120, 150 electric buses in Ireland. In Athlone has its own, the bus fleet in Athlone is fully electric. And so, the technologies are there. There are issues maybe around charging on longer distance routes and things like that. But the solutions for decarbonising the bus systems are there. I suppose the big problem that happens, again, it kind of falls into the social area, is when you want to give buses priority. And we saw that last summer in Dublin when the whole country seemed to lose its mind over the junction at the end of O'Connell Street, and changing that over, not banning traffic, but stopping through traffic happening there. And, right up to that, I think I was doing interviews nearly every day on that. Since it happened, I haven't been asked once about it, because it's been a massive success.
That's the same thing when people see it and it's there in front of them, and they just get on with it, And I also just wanted to ask you finally about misconceptions. Do you get a lot of kind of common misconceptions about achieving more sustainable transport systems?
There are misconceptions out there, I suppose. There's some people that think the engineers want to lose a run of themselves and build rail everywhere, and it's massively expensive and it's not feasible, and all of these types of things. And that bus could do the same type of movement of people. Not really. So say, for example, Metro, when that's built, that will move 50 million people, 55, I think, million people per year. You know, for a bus network to do that, basically, we would clog up our cities with buses. We wouldn't have the capacity to be able to achieve that. So that's one, this kind of bus versus rail argument that happens. I think a big thing about transport and proving that it works is basically being able to collect the data to show that it works. So, you know, if it's not counted, it doesn't count. So that you can say, yes, there are, you know, however many cyclists using the cycle lane, or yes, there are buses have gotten X amount faster because of some sort of an intervention. So the research and data collection behind proving that it works is vital, because then you build upon that. So the second phase of, say, the Dublin Transport Plan happened around the back of Trinity there recently enough. Very little kickback on that, and that's working. So now they're on to the next stage. So once you have the evidence to prove that it works, you can bring politicians and people with you.
Robert, IASA UK have plenty of large multidisciplinary projects on the go. When you're starting a new major transport infrastructure project, what's the first sustainability consideration that you could try and get onto the design table?
I mean, where to start, Dusty?
That's exactly the question.
Really enjoyed listening to what Brian was talking about there, and I think a key thing is about, you know, for our first point, minimizing the thing about sustainability. How are we minimizing the disruption on the people and the users? That's an absolute key point. But the other one is become now about intermodal and reusing space that we have. So, you know, the regeneration of the cities, as an example, is key here. So what we're talking about in Dublin, we've got you've got the Lewis line, you've got people coming on bike, you've got people coming in cars, you've got people on buses. How do you link those together? And for example, we've seen recently I'll try and take here that's pertinent to Dublin. We talk about Spencer Dock as a station that they want to put in for the Dart. And you can see you've got the Lewis line running along there. You've got the potential so from the Dart Plus that would be running up there, is how do you link those? How do you make those work together in a way that works for the people? And it is exactly as you're saying there, it's the crisscrossing, it's the interconnectivity. And I think if we don't do that, it's not sustainable, because you mentioned, Brian, and I mean, I'm a tunneling guy myself, so anything I can put underground here is definitely the best choice, and my technical passion, really. You know, don't get engineers started about engineering. Always easy way to say there's more concrete we can talk about, but the key thing here is that if you can get things underground and the transport network underground, but interlinking very well with what else is there and what else you want to do, is it's setting up that plan. So I think engineers need to be involved in helping drive those discussions to offer different solutions. So using technology, advanced BIM, talk about digital twinning, and trying to see, as you were saying, Brian, grab that data, understand how are people moving now. If you put this in here, how would that affect how they move? Because that can help us to come to a solution that's going to add more value.
So can you give us a simple example of something that you've worked on that has almost achieved or even fully achieved those things?
Yep, certainly. So I mean, we were talking about in Spain, in Barcelona, La Ceguera station in Barcelona, which we're working on at the moment, and it's effectively a connector and a catalyst for the communities. You're effectively adding another level underneath in the station and reusing the upper areas. So it's got connection of several different metro lines coming in together. You've got the bus stations that are coming in as well there. And effectively, you're converting the old corridors and the road trunks and rail yards to to be able to be reopened for active transit space in the top. And furthermore, building on that, we're doing this green corridor in Madrid at the moment in a road area. And what they're doing is effectively they're taking this whole road network and they're effectively cutting down underground. And they're going to put a slab over the top and move the road underground, which just reopens up all that space above ground. And in and around Madrid, they've been doing this extensively, moving there. And there's a beautiful area by the river now in Madrid that they've just reopened up to the public. And now over the last 5-10 years, this area has just been reborn as like a public space for people to use, to go out by the river to have social events and such.
So you've not just put in a practical solution in there, but you've made the quality of life better for people in the area. Brian, tunnelling is not something we do a huge amount of in Ireland. When it comes to sustainability, do you think it's a good solution for transport networks?
We haven't historically done much tunneling. I suppose there are a number of road tunnels across the country, but when we're putting, say, something like the metro, putting something like that in, to be able to deliver the capacity that's required for the north side of the city, the airport and beyond, it has to go underground. There's no two ways about it. In order to be able to achieve the capacity that's required. The ideas about putting some of the roads underground in our city centres, I don't think that would work in many of our city centres because of how densely populated and how dense the urban fabric is in there. But I agree with Rob. I think that, giving up more of that space for people is something that's very attractive, and it's something that we've seen. It's as Rob said, it's happening in Madrid. It's something that's happened in Paris. It's something that's happened in London. So when we give that space over to people, it changes how we use our cities and it changes how we move around them. I suppose the common thread in the cities that have done something like that is that they've had directly elected mayors, and they come in with a mandate to be able to change whatever it is they want in their cities, and that's what many of them do. And hopefully we'll see that in Limerick with the election of Ireland's first directly elected mayor, and that John down in Limerick can deliver the type of change, and then hopefully this idea of directly elected mayors would move across the rest of Ireland, and that Dublin, Waterford, Cork, and Galway would all get one.
I'd like to chat with both of you about sustainable infrastructure and sustainable transport in a few minutes. But first, just a few quick words from you about general sustainability principles in engineering. What do you think are the most critical sustainability metrics or KPIs that project engineers should be tracking and aiming to improve regardless of their specific sector? Which one of you would like to go with that?
I can go first if you like. I think the life cycle of the materials that have been used in whatever piece of infrastructure that's been built, I think is very important. A lot of the things we're talking about in Dublin will require an awful lot of concrete, an awful lot of steel, and historically that may not be the most climate efficient way of doing it. I think also a key principle should be to be reusing what we can, rather than chasing the new shiny glass, steel infrastructure, that we reuse what we have. And I think that's one of the most important kind of fundamentals that we look to in the built environment.
Rob, would you agree?
Yeah, well, certainly on the materials. I think the Civil Engineering Institute's been driving, and it's something that we're building into every project that we're doing now. What is the carbon amount that's coming out in concrete? Concrete is one of the most expensive in terms of carbon contributors, actually. And so looking for performance specifications that allow us to have a low carbon concrete is key. But one of the great things that you have in Ireland actually is your prefabrication. So whether I tell a lie or not, Silvertown Tunnel project, which we've just completed as a road tunnel in London, had prefabricated tunnel segments, right? And they came all the way over from Ireland. They came from Dublin, or around and about Dublin, but shipped over and then taken into the UK by river. Obviously, great great use there in terms of getting things off the road. But really what we are also need to recognise here is for Ireland is that you have good local products here, and we need to be using those. So if we, obviously it comes down to cost. No one wants to be paying for a more expensive solution. But sometimes we should also be thinking about when the clients, and I think I'm leaning back to a KPI here, the clients will put cost in there as a key point. If their clients raise sustainability as a KPI higher in their metric, then the contractors, the designers, the JVs, the EPC, when they're coming along, they're not just winning the job on cost. And sustainability should be put as a forefront into those contracts, because otherwise you get down the line and you talk about program, you talk about costs. And as a designer can be coming along and saying, great solution here, more carbon efficient. Recently we came up with a really innovative solution in London on a shaft where by the dimensions and the size of the shaft, we got it so you didn't have to take the TBM out. We saved space, saved excavation, and it could be reused for turning the TBM, which was fantastic for tunneling. The TBM's the tunneling machine. Sorry if I'll be more layman there. But that allowed us to reduce the volume of excavation, reduce the amount of concrete we were putting in the ground, which was great. But that worked from a cost efficiency point of view, as well as a sustainable solution. But we need sustainability to be driven from the top down.
How do you do that then in the real world? How do you influence clients and other stakeholders in a project to prioritize and invest in sustainable solutions?
I suppose the main client that's going to be paying for the type of work that Rob is talking about and I'm talking about is the state. And in Ireland, that Transportation Infrastructure Ireland, that they do have very, very good guidelines on sustainability and biodiversity as well in their infrastructure. So they are pushing that agenda from the top. But then when it gets down to the cost benefit analysis, because that's the one little ratio after, say, for example, Metro, when that went into on board Planola 2.5 years ago, a 20,000 page document, the one thing that everyone was interested in was this ratio on cost benefit at the very end, so that you build into cost benefit analysis and appraisal the benefits of sustainability and also biodiversity, because that's also something that's hugely important. Say, for example, in our urban areas, climate change is happening. Our cities are going to get warmer, and we need to be able to use nature to try and mitigate some of those impacts. So more tree canopies in our city centres, nature-based solutions around drainage and all of these types of things as well. But as I said, in Ireland, TII do a very good job at baking in sustainability into their guidelines. I think it needs to be done better when it comes to appraisal.
I'd add two things to that. So I'd say that the other things that we need to talk about is from a sustainability is about building a workforce, not importing a workforce. And from a sustainability point of view, from us as an engineering company, we want to bring in graduates, trainees, people and build them up. These projects are not a project for 2 years, right? 1 year or 6 months or whatever. These are projects that people can take their whole career out working on the Metrolink and the Dart Plus and whatever comes next, Lewis Line extension. That the upgrades to the transport system in Ireland need engineers. So we need to have KPIs very much around training, development, upskilling of people, and I'd then add into that as a second point. I'd talk about kind of digital modeling. So from an engineering perspective, coming back to that, we should try to plan and map everything out. I say this from a very engineering perspective. We should be planning and mapping things out. So getting percentage of the elements done in BIM or tracking digital maturity of the project, so that we can try to find the most efficient solutions. And there's now about doing things in 4D and 5D so that you can see the program, the time, the way that you're going through things. Because you can often find a lot of efficiencies in that. So I'd be saying digital adoption is really key from a sustainability point of view.
I think Rob is 100% correct. I think it's our people and our capacity to deliver this type of infrastructure is vital. In terms of, say, for example, the workforce, Metro is going to require about 8,000 people to be working on it when the project's at full tilt. We need to be thinking about where those people are going to live, where we're going to get those people from as well. I think also upskilling is a massively important thing as well for our community. In terms of the sustainability and of materials, but also climate adaptation as well. And in Trinity, we're launching Ireland's first MSc in climate adaptation in September. And we know that the workforce and we know that industry are very keen and excited to be involved in it. But how we adapt our infrastructure and how we adapt what we're building as well to the inevitable climate impacts that are coming down the track faster and faster is vitally important.
Brian, you've been touching a little bit there on planning, and there's been significant changes in the planning sector recently, which you know, with the new Act, the new Planning Authority. How should planners and engineers work to create seamless, sustainable, multimodal transport networks in our towns and cities? That sounds like a bit stupid, doesn't it? Hang on. You see, I'm always the one who messes up with the thing. There's more editing done on me than anything else. So anyways, so Brian, you were touching on significant changes in the planning sector recently with the new Act and the new Planning Authority. Do you think that this is going to help? Will it make things more efficient? Will it be able to help us reach our goals that we want with sustainability and engineering?
Well, it can't hurt.
Okay.
We're at currently at the moment in terms of transport. There's a number of projects that are in on board Planola. In fairness, all of the bus corridors as part of Bus Connects have left on board Planola, and some of them will start construction pretty quickly. But the big ticket projects like Metro, light rail projects are still in on board Planola. I think planning is kind of the reason. If you talk to somebody in the energy sector or in the water sector or housing, they will say planning. Planning is the big issue. It's because we have a bottleneck. We have a capacity issue there. We don't have enough people. I do think that we need certain pieces of infrastructure that are critically important to the state, perhaps need to be fast-tracked in a different model than on board Planola or the new model that they've set up. Something specific, say for example, like I think for the critical infrastructure, so things like, say for example, light rail in Cork, light rail extensions in Dublin, the Metro, any of those types of projects, I think that they could be taken outside of the same authority that's dealing with, your housing extension and a number of other things. So I think that I think that those critical pieces of infrastructure are critical for a reason. And the type of infrastructure that we need to build over the next to reach our climate goals by the end of this decade and probably the next one are going to be so big. This year is 100 years since we started construction on Ardnach Russia. Yeah. And when Ardnach Russia was being built, that was a national effort, shoulder to the wheel. The whole country got behind it, and the benefits are there 100 years on. The issue is we have to build maybe 5 or 6 Ardnach Russias right now in terms of the scale of infrastructure required, and we need the shoulder to the wheel, and I think we need very brave politicians to push green buttons on big projects.
Brian, can I ask you specifically about sustainable transport? We're supposed to have 640,000 EVs on the road by 2030, somewhere around there. What do you see I know you've spoken a lot about rail and road and buses in particular, but what are the key infrastructure challenges, aside from charging stations, that engineers need to address in their plans today in order to support our transition to EV?
So the actual target for EVs is, I think it's 845,000 EVs by the end of the decade. Okay. I've been on record a number of times saying that's impossible. I don't think it will happen. In terms of the engineering solutions, I suppose they're there. The charging infrastructure, as you alluded to, does need to get better, but the solutions are there. There needs to be more solutions around charging. infrastructure in urban areas where people don't have driveways and things like that, that they're all there. But the one caveat I would put to all of this is that we're swapping one technology that doesn't work. You know, the petrol and diesel cars don't work for our cities, and we're swapping it out with electric cars. The car doesn't work in cities. I suppose that's the kind of fundamental thing to think about. The Department of Transport put out a piece of research there a few weeks back, and it said that congestion in Dublin is going to hit 1.5 billion per year by the end of by 2040. Congestion costs in Galway will triple by the end of the decade, and in Waterford and in Cork as well will double. So regardless of what type of car it is, if it's been fueled, if it's Fred Flintstone running along the ground, it still takes up the same amount of size and still causes congestion. If we're swapping one technology out for another, it's a little bit... I always thought it a bit strange that we would swap out something that doesn't work fundamentally for something that is a bit cleaner.
Well, a lot of people say they drive cars into cities because there is no public transport solution for them. And that is particularly true when you're outside of Dublin. And I suppose it's down to a case of scale, because if you've got, I don't know, whatever, 250,000 people in Cork city centre or Limerick, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's not huge anyway. So you've got the cost benefit side of things. However, when people do live in cities where there is good public transport, it does tend to kind of change their behavior. And Rob, I think you might have more experience of that, because you mentioned projects in Barcelona where they've got a lot more public transport options available for there. What's your view on this?
Certainly. I mean, the opportunity to choose your route, let's say to work. If you're working in the city centre or you're working around, and obviously everybody isn't, there was a huge modal shift obviously after COVID with the amount of people that are travelling and what days of the week and how often they're travelling, but still they need to get there. And you're thinking, do I need a car to get into the city centre, let's say for 2 days, 3 days a week in the office? That changes your mindset a little bit. And you're thinking, well, there's a bus or there is a tram. Light rail is really very popular. And that coupled with the options of the metro and even bicycle schemes, as you've seen. The old Boris bike in London was a great example of getting people more on bikes, but it's intermodaling the roadways. And I've seen that this is coming in Ireland as well. But what we have in Spain is very clear bicycle lanes, so that it's safe for people to travel around. Obviously, some of our cities, I think Madrid's a little bit uphill. Barcelona's a lot more flat, so you get preferences. But Dublin's not that hilly as a country, as a city, so to speak. So the key things is the population density. That's a key challenge, I'd say, for yourselves here in Ireland. In Dublin, obviously, it's a lot more condensed in. I'd be saying that the fact that you can go from one transport system, so you can come in on the rail, for example, you can then change over onto the metro to get to close to where you need to work, and then it's a 10-minute walk. That option that's out there to people, it fundamentally changes the way that they're working, and you don't need a car. So when I started living previously in Madrid, I didn't have a car. I didn't need a car to get around. I had a small kid come along, and then suddenly life changes, and you then need something for the buggy and such. And I found the public transport struggled with that. So I'd say that would be a key thing to be considering for different types of people.
I have that myself. I lived in Europe for a bit in a big city, and I didn't need a car, just use, because the public transport was good. And then you've reminded me of I was on holidays in Montpellier, and they've got the Lewis. Well, I called it the Lewis down there as well. Exactly the same thing, but it's free for residents of the city. If you're a resident of the city, you go in with your utility bill, and they just give you a free card, and off you go, and everybody uses it. There's an awful lot. There's a big walking area in the middle. Anyway, I digress. What do I know? I'm not the expert.
No, but that's a great incentivization, right? So, you talk about, Brian, your challenge there about changing one system to another. They're doing some trials in an engineering system. I think it's in Coventry. I'll need to check that. But about trying to do light rail, but in a way where you only take out a very small amount of the top layer of the ground to put this in. So you're not disturbing utilities, because it's always, there's a utility crossing. How are you going to get your light rail in over that? So key things that IS is trying to bring in Spain, and we're getting there, is this light rail in the cities. So in Seville, in the south of Spain, where IS was actually founded as a company, they're bringing in 3 or 4 different light rail systems into the city to crisscross the different directions. At the moment in Dublin, we've just got the Lewis that's running through as the line as it is, and it hasn't got anything to connect to.
Well, I think they're working on that and putting in some new lines. It's just been announced in the news recently. Can I ask both of you then, when you're looking at the plan and you're looking at systems and you want things to interconnect, which digital or kind of data analysis tools are proving to be the most effective in optimizing resource management and reducing the environmental impact of the projects?
So I suppose in terms of the modeling and how we model our transport networks, the kind of the approaches that have been used have been kind of used for multiple decades. So it would be kind of the traditional 4-stage model, where you look at where people want to travel to and from, the modes of transport that they select, and then how you assign that traffic and to networks. That is getting much more advanced. It is getting much more sophisticated when you look at different preferences, and you start to look at kind of what we call agent-based models, whereby you're not assuming people are all generic and that there are different preferences. Like, say, for example, Rob's preference there within a census period, say in Spain, could be 10 years. They would assume that at some point, that perhaps Rob would have a kid and blah, blah, blah. And so how his modes of transport would change. So those models are very sophisticated. They are able to estimate traffic on roads and public transport usage very, very to a very high degree of certainty. So the models are there, and the data is there on how we move around. And as I said, it is getting more sophisticated with AI and GPS tracks and phones and all of that kind of stuff. But the models that are there that kind of justify building, say, for example, light rail and all of these other kind of things, we know they work. And it's not for want of better models or better data that we're not where we need to be, say, for example, in Dublin or any of the other cities. It's for the want of actually doing the construction. It's for the want of actually having the political will, as I mentioned earlier on, to start these big projects. And Rob mentioned there about Coventry, and it is in Coventry that they're doing this very light rail. So as an example of how we could do things quickly, and we need to start to do things quickly. It's not a status quo we're in at the moment. We declared a climate emergency. We have congestion. We've almost gotten a congestion emergency, or will have one in our cities if our population continues to increase. I think we need to pilot things. I think we need to be a bit more innovative in the types of things we look at.
Rob, for an engineer who's looking to shift towards more sustainable project management, what advice would you give to them to navigate the commercial and the contractual aspects of a project?
Okay, that's a very good question. So you're saying, as an engineer that wants to move more towards it?
Exactly. So when you're in that commercial and contractual stage of it, how do you get that sustainability built in? So
as we said at the beginning, when we as an engineering firm, and we're working for the client, to the ultimate client, and we're looking at the project, what we need to be doing is to be coming to them with how we think we can add value to the client. So when we're developing the design up, and this is what we're doing, right? We're coming to the client and we're saying, there's these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different options that we can consider, and the way those options are being developed are adding value in terms of, as we said, This might be slightly more complicated, but it reduces. So, say to the client, we want you to specify for adding air quality sensors, for example, to a new point in the world, or there should be some type of one of the key challenges we have in Spain. Just coming back to that as an example, is about heat. Obviously, reducing the urban heat. So, a smart drip irrigation system is something we put in this this green motorway that I was referring to earlier. So we as clients, we need to come to our clients and say to them, hey, it's not just about designing a solution that gets you from A to B. It's now about, if you do this as well, you can add some value in terms of, and touching on a sustainable point, which is what we're all about here today, is about coming up with sustainable solutions. And it's got to move away from sustainability just being seen in engineering as traditional days of reducing carbon. It's not just about reducing carbon now. It's about looking at the whole thing. It's about saying, setting up academies, finding smart systems or smart ways of doing work, helping ourselves to work with clients that have maybe not delivered such major infrastructure projects before and are unaware of how they can bake in benefits.
You both come from different sides of the equation. So Brian, you're with Trinity. Robert, you're with a full commercial body. Both Trinity and IESA are involved in research and innovation, though. That's something that you have in common. Do you see a day where academic institutions and commercial engineering firms might actually work together to build sustainable development on a bigger level? Or is it happening already?
I would say it's definitely happening already. It's happening at great pace. There's a great ecosystem of international engineering and domestic engineering companies in Dublin that Trinity use extensively, not only in civil engineering and all aspects of engineering within the school in Trinity. We have placement programs where students go and they spend 3 or 4 months in companies in Dublin and beyond. So it is happening. I think the penny on that has dropped a long time ago, and that we see the mutual benefits to each other to do these types of things. And there are many engineering companies in Ireland that have funded research that we've done, and they also fund, say, lab experiments, lab equipment in our universities. They've kind of stepped in where the state was maybe, was lacking in some cases. And we're about to open up a brand new building called the Learning Foundry in Trinity, which is part of an E3 program, which is computer science and natural science and engineering. And it's the three entities coming together to look at solutions around the kind of things we're talking about here in terms of climate, biodiversity, the built environment, and no one kind of discipline or one kind of area of thought has the ownership on this. And I suppose that's what we looked at in Trinity to merge these all together. And industry are very heavily involved in that building and in the ethos of what we do within the school. And not just in Trinity, all of the other universities in Ireland are very much engaged with industry.
And Rob, how about IESA? Are you integrating and working with academic institutions?
Certainly. I mean, taking examples as Brian's saying, definitely a key thing for us is bringing on board young engineers that are during their study, getting them a feel for, not to say real life, but what is working life? What is it like working on the actual projects? See if we can get them out on site, get them to see a bit of construction actually happening as well as their design, so they can understand it's not just sitting there and doing some analysis, but it leads to somewhere. I would also go on to further say that there's a great contrary to this. So as you said about investing in studying, we are in the business quite often of working on a project, getting that project built. And there's nothing more satisfying as an engineer. I mean, I think that's why we all came into engineering, at least I think so at the beginning, is you get to see a project at the end. You get to see something, you get to say to your kids, oh, look, that's the road tunnel I did to your kids kind of thing. So there's a great passion there. So people getting that, but I was saying that there's a lot of complex development that we want to do, which for us sometimes sitting there in ourselves, we don't have the access to some of the tools that Brian might have in Trinity. So we would want to reach out to them and say to them, to the universities, how can we work together? How can we get some dedicated people that are focused on developing up solutions? Now, some of those times we've taken in Spain, in Seville, we're doing a series of BIM models. So simply instead of what the client's asking of us, we're going ahead and we're saying we want to do something else. So we're reaching out to those universities that are local to where we're based, and we're saying to them, for example, we did a station recently in Madrid, in an interconnection station there out to the airport. And so in the airport in Madrid, we're doing a full digital modeling of the whole airport there. And so we're working locally with the specialists, the universities, the academic people, to bring those people on board with us to help to develop tools that just didn't exist before. So you've got drones out there mapping. Has to be very careful in an airport environment with drones, but very carefully mapped. And pulling that all together. So for us, it's paramount. It's educating from both sides. It's sharing, and I think if we come back to a Dublin context, and the knowledge that Trinity and the other universities has of the ground, and what we as Bernlubi have as the knowledge of the ground, which is going to be a key issue for Dublin, for any growth underground. We need to come together. We need to share that information to de-risk any problems that could occur. So from my perspective, if I look at it back in an Irish perspective here, that's absolutely fundamental. That's something that we are already doing.
Just before we wrap up our podcast today, is there anything that we've missed that either of you would like to mention, or is there anything you'd like to ask each other?
I was going to say, I think the thing that we underestimate is the capacity of the sector to be able to deliver what we need, what we're required to deliver, particularly in transport infrastructure. I think one of the things, and Madrid's often held up as Rob has been mentioned, as a great example of how they were able to bring projects together quickly, and they were able to double, triple the size of their metro system by having really good planning in place. And I think that's the type of value added that Dublin needs right now, that we can show how we can sequence these projects and actually deliver them. And then, like, just again on the point we were making about the industry collaboration, when our students go out on placements, they exponentially grow. It's a fundamental change you see in them when they come back to do their final year. But there is our civil engineering departments are struggling to get the amount of students that are required, and the amount of graduates that are required. And that's from a number of different perspectives as to why that is. But I think one of them, if we're tasking civil engineers with, saving the planet and saving our cities and congestion, we need to be paying them a little bit more. And I think that's something the industry needs to look at too.
Rob, anything from yourself?
So give a little bit of a segue here into where I'm going, Dusty. So recently we held in Seville the ESEX, which is basically a rail international meeting, and DART came over, Metrolink came over, and they've been over there, and they're doing a bit of a tour, a European tour, I think, here at the moment. And why are they doing this? And this is important. They're trying to motivate people to be interested in their projects. So some of it will be public finance, some projects will be privately financed, but they're trying to motivate people. They're trying to get out there, but they're also trying to find ideas. They're trying to bring over that experience. So there's no stranger to the Spanish engineering companies getting involved in construction in Ireland. I think they've definitely come over with big enthusiasm. And the one thing that we always as engineers want is certainty. We can invest a lot of time, we can develop everything up with you, we can get it built, but we just need certainty that that project's real, it's coming, to invest our time and attention in it. Otherwise, it's a big world. There's a lot of projects going on. We can be investing that time and attention somewhere else. Now, we see Dublin has the need, it has the desire, it has the passion. We can see that things are getting approved, that are getting moved. The Irish Rail in particular are really keen in taking a proactive step. And that for us is music to our ears. So it's great that they're going out. They're trying to get the information. They're trying to publicize. They're trying to bring in the resource, as Brian said. This is a key challenge, but it has to be tempered with what I would say international expertise coming over to help us, but growing up. So the next generation needs to come in here behind us.
Good note to end on. If you'd like to find out more about Brian and Rob and some of the topics that we spoke about today, we'll have notes and link details in the description area of this podcast right now. But Brian Caulfield, a professor in transportation at Trinity College Dublin, and Robert Sizer, Director of Engineering for UK at IESA, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dusty.
If you enjoyed our podcast today, do share with a friend in the business. Just tell them to search for Engineers Ireland in their podcast player. The podcast is produced by dustpod.io for Engineers Ireland. And for more on sustainability and engineering, do visit the website at engineersireland.ie. Until next time, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, thank you for listening to our special sustainability mini-series.